All right, so just to continue our discussion from yesterday, we're just talking here. We mentioned the Gemara, which said yesterday that quoted the verse which says, "Adam la'amal yulad," man is born to toil, born to work. We talked about why that is and how that is, and we explained based on the Rabbi's teaching of this Gemara. Although there are, of course, many explanations to this, we just heard some of them. That the reason why we are inborn with the nature to desire to work and get things done is because it's a nature that helps us transcend just being a part of creation and become a contributor into creation as a partner with God. And therefore each of these stages are necessary in climbing the ladder and becoming a partner with Hashem. First of all, working in the world is the way in which you contribute to society, and then doing so as a speaker, as a malsich, as a speaker, as a human being, not just as an animal who works, but as a human being who works. But beyond that is the toil and Torah, becoming a partner with God on God's terms, because you're contributing to the world through the divine medium and not just through the human medium. So as I mentioned, there are a number of other explanations, and there's an interesting one where Rabbi elaborates from there's a Kabbalistic one, for example, which is quoted in Torah and other places, that Amal Sicha, where the verse says that, where the Gemara said that there's the toil of speech, it's talking about the Zohar refers to the speech of creation as milid hadyota, as in like there were simple words. The words of Torah are not simple words; those are God's words of Torah. Right? God speaks Torah and God speaks creation. But the Zohar makes a differentiation that the speech of the world is milid hadyota. It's like simple words. God created a world. Okay, so He spoke world into existence. But Torah, those are His words. That's the real thing, and that's the Gemara is talking about here. Is talking about a malsichas. It's a bit of a Kabbalistic thing, talking about the work of speech as in the work of creation, which in reference to person would be a person elevating creation, like engaged in a malsicha, engaged in elevating the things that God spoke into existence. That is to say, taking the world around us and elevating it, and beyond that is even Torah. That's a kind of Kabbalistic explanation. But the previous Rebbe said an explanation, which Rebbe explains, and it's very nice. It says like this: Amal Malacha, the first option, which is the toil of work, just labor, is talking about someone who's malachta b'amunah. It's not the work itself. That's the toil that the Gemara is praising, or that the Gemara is suggesting might be the reason why you're born. But rather, the work in an honest fashion. That's the toil. Everybody works. Everybody likes to work. The real amal, the real effort that needs to be exerted, is that malacha be done like a Jew, honestly and faithfully, etc. With tzedakah, and it's one level. Amal sicha, the toil of speech, says the previous Rebbe is talking about the toil of davening, of prayer. And here too, the Rebbe says that these are like three stages, stacked one on top of the other. Right? Working with faith and honesty, working that and with faith and knowing that Hashem is the one who provides. So it's true that it's expression of one's faith and that the person acknowledges that Hashem is providing, but nonetheless, the limitations of this physical world tell you that you need to work, even if you have faith that Hashem is going to provide. Right? So you're working with faith for Hashem, but you're still stuck in the parameters of the physical world. When it comes to prayer, so now already you're not talking about what the world says you should or shouldn't do. You're talking to Hashem directly. Break the rules. That's what prayer is. You're transcending it. So now you're going a little bit beyond. But even in prayer, the way prayer is described as a sulam mutzav aretz v'reishim b'gashamayim, the ladder that rests on the earth and its top goes to the heavens. Meaning to say, a prayer comes from the place where you stand. That's prayer is supposed to be. Right? Whereas when it comes to learning, as we'll see in a moment, the primary here is to put yourself aside and listen to the words of what's being written or what's being said or what's being taught. Whereas with prayer, it's not about putting yourself aside. On the contrary, it's finding where you truly are and expressing yourself to Hashem going upward. So even though it's true that prayer transcends the limitations of the world, but it still comes from a place of the created being from where you stand as a human being. And then a person elevates to Amal of Torah, the toil of Torah, where Torah is not about where I stand or what I feel and what I think and where I am, but it's where God thinks and where God feels. So I completely transcend. So these are like levels, and slowly transcending the limitations of this world. Doing business honestly with faith and trust in Hashem, So you've transcended somewhat, but you're still within the realm of the world. Prayer, you've transcended even more because you're not stuck with what the world says you have to do. But it still comes from your place, from where you stand, where you feel, which is still human. And then finally, Torah, you transcend to the highest level where you're speaking divine words and completely transcend the reality of our world. So those are two explanations with respect to understanding this Gemara in 3 levels of what the work and toil a person was born to do. Now the Gemara has, in connection with this, a very, very nice line, which we'd all do well to remember. Okay, so we are in Tzedek Testament Beis 99b, and it's 12 lines down from the top of the page. It's the second word. The first word is Nivra, and the second word is Vahainu. So after the Gemara concludes that the loftiest level of amal, the loftiest level of effort and toil that a person was born to do is the toil in Torah. So says the Gemara this, Vahainu. This is the meaning of the statement. The Amar Rava, that which Rava said, Kulei Gufay, every body is druftikininu. They are like receptacles, vessels. Lucky is the one who becomes the receptacle for Torah. In other words, you're already born with the ingrained nature to work and toil. The question is, where is the effort going to go? So, certainly on the simple level of the Gemara, where the Gemara is talking about literal work and literal speech and literal Torah learning, before you get to the Rebbe's explanation, and certainly this line has a lot of weight. A person is going to be putting his effort in learning. A person is going to be putting his effort in life. The person is going to be born and driven to work and toil. And the question is, what's the object of that work? Right? It's important to make a distinction between the innate nature a person has and then the object of the expression of that nature. Right? A person is born with the desire to want to eat. That in and of itself is benign. But what do you want to eat and how do you want to eat? Kosher, not kosher, like a mensch with a bracha, or gluttonously and whatnot, right? So the inborn innate nature to want to eat is not the problem. The question is the object of how you apply that. So the same thing is true here. The inborn nature that a person is born with, the drive to want to work and toil and to create something and to build something and to achieve something, that's benign. The question is, what's the object of that and the expression of that nature? And that's what Rabbi is saying. Every person's born a receptacle. I mean, everybody's born with a clean slate of potentiality. And the only question is, in what direction you're going to take that. Is it going to be filled with, certainly if you're taking the literal meaning of the Gemara, is it going to be filled with toiling for work or toiling for Torah? And even on the levels that Rebbe is talking about, where a person's contributing to society and whatnot, then certainly lucky is the one who's going to be at the highest strata of contributing in the toil of Torah. Moreover, and this is something I think is interesting, Rabbi stresses that kulei gufa, like every body, every human being, is an empty receptacle. It means everybody. So if we're going to understand it to mean that the body, in the context here, we're talking about the innate abilities to do things. Right? My innate ability, my innate desire or drive to achieve, my innate desire to eat, all my innate human tendencies that are empty receptacles, and the question is what I fill it with, what the object of, and how I express that. And Rav is stressing that everybody's like this. So that would mean a person's born, something like yesterday's conversation, a person's born with the innate ability to play music. In and of itself, it's benign. The question is what kind of music and in what ways it's going to express itself. Same thing with art, with even physical activity, a person who likes to work with his hands. Everybody, and everybody, every human being, and every capacity and tendency and talent and potential that a person is born with at birth is completely benign. There is no one talent that a kid's born with that you say, nope, that's a bad one. They're empty receptacles. And the question becomes how you use it and in what way you harness it. And then it could either become the toil of nothing or the toil of Torah in any way, whether it's through music or whether it's through poetry, through art, through whatever the person's talents and capacities and drives are.
It's not one or the other, right? I mean, like
we're says, complex.
Work should be combined with Torah study.
Yeah,
that's the optimal thing. So
to
the receptacle, it's really almost like really a double receptacle.
Right, which is Yeah, so one could say that that's why Rav is saying lucky is the one who gets to be the receptacle of Torah. I mean, to say the person who's not is not doing something wrong. He's just not as lucky. Like there's a famous Gemara elsewhere which says that the world needs leather and the world needs spices. Lucky is the one perfumes. Lucky is the one whose job is to be a perfume maker, and unlucky is the one whose job it is to be a leather maker, a tanner. It doesn't make that person a bad person in any way, right? So someone who's becomes a vehicle for Amal Malacha in a healthy, good way is not a bad person. Maybe not as lucky, as the way Rabbi puts it. Zachi is lucky. But even so, like you're saying, even someone who's born to be Amal Malacha, to work honestly with faith and contribute to society in that way, should not negate their responsibility to be of Torah study, which actually we're going to get to. We're going to get to soon here. Yeah. To your conversation. And the Gemara, which actually would explain the next line of the Gemara and its connection. The next line of the Gemara would explain that. So the Gemara says like this. The verse reads in Mishlei. I think it's in Mishlei. Yeah, Mishlei 6:32. Mishlei in English is Proverbs, right? Noyef Isha Chaser Lev. One who commits adultery lacks heart. So literal meaning is you're lacking heart, you're lacking commitment. Cheating, you're lacking heart. It's a simple meaning.
Lev is also the symbol for like the mind, because mind's in the
Yeah, right. But the simple meaning, literal meaning is person who cheats on his wife is lacking a heart. He's lacking sentiment, lacking fidelity. More broadly speaking, before we even get to the Gemara's interpretation, it could mean something like a person is committed to Hashem, he's in a relationship with Hashem, but every now and again he indulges outside. So he's like an adulterer in that sense. So he's lacking a heart, he's lacking understanding. But the Gemara takes it even more broadly, and kind of a little bit in the inverse. Amar Reish Lakish said, Zeh, this verse, which says that the one who commits adultery is lacking a heart, is Haloimed Taka HaTorah Leprakim, is someone who learns Torah intermittently. Like, in other words, his relationship, whereas over here, till now we've been learning that your relationship with God is the wife, and the adultery is the way you're behaving outside of that relationship. The Gemara does it in the inverse. Your relationship with Hashem has become like your relationship with an adulterer, with a woman you're not supposed to be with. Namely, you don't live with her, you don't spend all your time with her, but you pop in every now and again. So as if to say, like, I don't spend my time studying Torah, whatever, every now and again I come say hello to the Torah class. It's not consistent. So says the Gemara, this is like someone whose relationship with God is like a guy's relationship with a mistress, where instead of having a committed relationship where they're together consistently, he's intermittently popping in, popping out. So I guess back to your point, you're saying, so even someone who's not, maybe this is why the Gemara is connecting it. So even someone who's not as lucky, Rabbi before said lucky is the one who's a receptacle for the study, for the Amal Torah to be dedicated to the toil of Torah. So someone who's not that lucky, his job is to work or to be involved in some other capacity in serving Hashem. But nonetheless, it's to make sure that his relationship to Torah is not intermittent. It should be consistent.
It should be a marriage of convenience.
Exactly. So maybe there's a connection.
Fits into my schedule.
Yeah.
I'll chop a shear.
Like the Rabbi used to say,
I have an open hour. I'll think.
Yeah. The Rabbi used to say that we say the common terminology is that a person should have a kviyas itim l'Torah. A person should have a set time for Torah study. So the Rabbi used to say a kviyas itim, a set time, and kviyas benefesh, which means it's set in me. I don't go a day without learning Torah. It's not like a person has a set time to eat breakfast or to eat during the day. And if you miss that time, so you're not eating that day. You're still eating that day, because it's not just a set time when you eat, but it's set in myself that I eat every day because I have to eat every day. Same thing with Torah study. The person doesn't miss it. And this leads us to the next verse the Gemara is going to quote, which actually refers to Torah as food. In a number of places the verse refers to Torah as food, but here the Gemara quotes this verse, which says, it's also in Mishlei, Chod Beis Yud Ches, which says, Ki noyim, how pleasant it is, ki tishmenem bebitnech, that you will keep Torah in your stomach, bebitnecha, in your stomach. Achaynu yachdav asvasecha, it will dwell on your lips. So the verse is saying, just to put it in context of this Gemara, the verse is saying that the Torah should dwell in you and on your lips. That is to say, it should be consistent. Just like food is consistent. You're always eating. You don't have to remind yourself to eat. Maybe you do, but your body will get hungry enough to remind you to eat. Your mind and your neshama should be the same way. You missed your class, you still have to learn that day. Because a yid doesn't go a day without learning, just like a human being doesn't go a day without eating. But we can actually hone in on two. The verse makes two different things here. Number one, it's in your stomach. And number two, it's on your lips. So what perhaps are these two things? So for those who are with us in the Tanya Shir on Shabbos afternoon, we know that the Alter Rebbe makes two different elements to the uniqueness or the importance of learning Torah. The first comes in chapter 5, where there he stresses Yediyas HaTorah, knowledge of Torah, which is one mitzvah. One mitzvah which is Yediyas HaTorah, to know Torah. In fact, there's even a mitzvah to know the entire Torah. It's machlekes what qualifies the entire Torah. Rambam has one version, the Alter Rebbe has a different version. Rebbe talks about that. But there's a mitzvah to know all of Torah, or at least to endeavor to get to that point. So that's one mitzvah, knowing Torah. And the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 5, the uniqueness of the mitzvah of knowing Torah is that unlike every other mitzvah, where you are engaged in the act, the mitzvah of knowledge Torah is the divinity of Torah comes inside of you. Right? And there he makes the reference to B'seiroscha B'seich Meya, the other verse in Tehillim where David HaMelech says, your Torah is in my stomach. Just like food becomes absorbed in who I am, literally the physical food becomes absorbed in my blood and my flesh. So likewise, the Torah that I take in and I know becomes part of my psyche, becomes part of the way I think, part of the way I feel, and part of the way I view the world. Like food that becomes part of my body, the Torah becomes part of my neshama. That's one element of Torah, as food. Something that's inside of me becomes part of who I am, specifically related to the knowledge of Torah. Knowing Torah, accumulating information. But then there's another element of Torah, which is the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. One mitzvah is knowing Torah, that we just described, which is primarily a mitzvah of in the cognitive sense, where a person has to acquire the information, and that's the kind of Torah which is like in my stomach, it becomes part of who I am. But then there's a mitzvah of not knowing Torah, but studying Torah. The mitzvah of studying Torah, we learned like a couple weeks ago, is primarily through speech, physically speaking the words of Torah. And that's the second half of the verse, which says that it's on your lips, to physically verbalize the words. And as we explained there in Tanya, that why is it so important that these mitzvahs become on your lips? Because in that way, the mitzvah of Torah permeates the physical body and nefesh habahamis, the animal soul. Because part of the point is, as we learned in the last few weeks in Tanya, that the purpose is to bring godliness into this physical world. So the mitzvahs should and ought, first of all, most of the mitzvahs do, and a person should endeavor that the mitzvah should engage more of the physical world. Right, we even talked about the person shuckling during davening, shaking, where his physical body is involved in the mitzvah. So the more of his physical body is involved in the mitzvah, the more godliness he's bringing to the physical world. And thus, there's the other element of Torah study, in which a person brings godliness not as like a food into the knowledge, but onto his lips. There's physical mouth that's physically moving, and the animating soul, the nefesh habahamis, that's moving those lips, are engaged in the mitzvah too, and it too is sanctified. So it has both these elements in the stomach, like food, knowledge of Torah, and on the lips, the speaking of Torah, that the Torah permeate my physical body, my physical reality.
Did he also say there, I forget, that by saying it loud, it actually goes into the world, not just for you physically, or not? That was something.
I don't remember the Alter saying that, but there are other places, like for example in Hayom Yom, where saying the words of Torah purifies the ear, the tires aver.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I don't remember it saying in Tanya.
Okay.
It could be, I don't remember, but that is a true point as well. The physical, the sound waves that come out of my mouth purify the ear. The Chabad Rabbeim used to have certain maimorim that they would say, repeat over years, right? Remember, it's in Hayom Yom. I thought they had certain set of maimorim that they would say every couple of years, almost verbatim, and the point was to purify the ear. The tire sa'avir, that the physical world have that Torah in it. Yep, and that comes through speech rather than the understanding of Torah. But there's both of these elements as we just described. Okay, we'll begin the next Gemara, even though there's much more to it, but at least we'll begin it, and then we'll continue more detail on Monday. So we'll begin the Gemara, and then I'll give you a kind of an introduction to how perhaps we should understand the Gemara. Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught in the Mishnah age text. I've yet to discover why this Gemara comes at this point. Like why the Gemara is raising this issue right now, but maybe as we go along we'll figure out the connection to the previous Gemaras.
Well, the previous Gemara, but
about studying Torah and the importance of studying. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Okay, got it. Good point. Okay, so our sages taught. They quotes the verse in Bamidbar, which talks about someone who speaks negatively about God. I'm putting it mildly. And speaking negatively about God is, the verse there prescribes excision at the hands of heaven, which, as Rabbi Gimel just suggested, that's a connection to the previous Gemara we were talking about, desecrating the word of Torah.
Yeah, two psukim are the one
It's in the same context in the Gemara. In the
pasuk 30, the next one is 30.
Yeah, it should have been obvious to me. Thank you.
Yeah. But to tell you, it's good kabul chomer. See, someone can despise Torah when you study. Here's actually studying Torah and then despising it.
I mentioned that once, that on one level, denying Torah's divinity is bad. On another level, accepting its divinity but then denying or misusing it sometimes can be even worse, because you're actually corrupting.
He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. So let's think about this. Like a person, nefesh means like a person or a soul, a person, which will act high-handedly. Meaning, the verse goes on to say, acts high-handedly and speaks negatively about God. So who is an example of somebody who speaks high-handedly? Says the Gemara is Menashe ben Chizkiah. This is Menashe son of Chizkiah. Menashe son of Chizkiah was a king of the Israelite kingdom, right in the middle of the first temple period, not in the middle actually, towards the beginning of the first temple period. There was an unfortunate split between the descendants of King David, and the Jewish people split between the 10 tribes in the north, known as the Kingdom of Israel, and the 2.5 tribes in the south, known as the Kingdom of Judah. And they both had their troubles at different times, but for the most part, overall, the northern kingdom was involved in idolatry, and the lower kingdom was serving God, at least for the most part. And later, of course, the northern kingdom was dispersed by Sanhedrin, and that's the 10 lost tribes. So Menashe ben Chizkiah was one of the leading kings who took that northern kingdom and really took it far off from Judaism.
No, Menashe is the southern kingdom.
No.
Yeah, Menashe. Chizkiah Melech. He was the two tribes.
He's King Melech Yisrael. Are you sure?
Yeah, because Chizkiah, in his time, already 10 tribes were exiled by Sanhedrin.
So where did I just read that he's from the kingdom of Israel?
Menashe is famous, the king with the wicked king. That's the kind of.
So sorry, so it's reverse.
Yeah.
He's the king of Judah. He's one of those people who try to mess up the kingdom of Judah.
It's even worse because his father was the great.
His father Chizkiah was a great king, for sure.
Exactly, the great tzaddik, and how could he come out so negative?
Okay, so I mixing him up with Rechavam.
Oh, Rechav, yeah.
Mixing him up.
Right, Rabbi ben Nevat, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm mixing him up.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right about that. Sorry.
This is a real avla because.
Okay, so my apologies. Yeah. So Menashe is Fakart. He's from the southern kingdom.
He's rebelling against the Torah,
and
his father.
In the southern kingdom, which predominantly was good, he tried to sway them to go go bad.
Yeah, but
makes it in a way worse. Yeah. Okay.
Against Torah because it probably bothered him. His father was a great tzaddik, and he couldn't keep up.
Chizkiah, who's the person we said earlier, took the years of Mashiach.
His miracle, his merit, the whole people were saved. They didn't even fight, and that Menashe, the son. But it happened something in the from world where the father was a great rabbi and some of the kids.
I'm trying to remember. I read somewhere he was a kingdom of Yisrael. That's why I went with that.
They become like I wouldn't say Bikurim, but they become a very negative attitude towards Torah and Judaism. They know that's the problem. If they don't know it all, you can try to recur them. These people know they studied in yeshivas, and then their mind is.
I don't know where I read that he was a kingdom of Israel.
Yeah.
Trying to see where I read that. Okay, my apologies.
Yeah.
All right, so the Gemara says like this. Menashe ben Chizkiah said like this, speaking high-handedly negative against Torah and God. It said like this: he would sit and expound flawed interpretations of the Torah. For example,
he wants to say that the Torah
is a waste of time.
Waste of time. It's like it's frivolous information.
Yeah.
Like things they don't care.
So Omar, he said like this: did Moshe have nothing else to write? They have to fill the verses with the silliness, nonsense, God forbid. Ella, for example, Va'acha is Loitan Timna, that the sister of Loitan was a woman named Timna. Like, who cares who Timna is? The Timna is Pelegesh la Lifaz, and Timna was a concubine to Eliphaz, son of Esav. Or another verse, and Reuven went out in the time of the harvest, and he took Dudaim as a kind of flowers. We'll talk about that soon. So he's quoting a bunch of verses that seem like they're their useless information.
He's also denying
And he spoke in
divinity.
fun.
He's also saying Moshe wrote this as opposed to Hashem.
As opposed to God, yeah.
Right.
He's saying it's a book of wasted
It's
times.
like a book of literature, like poetry or whatever, or fiction rather.
Nothing else to write but this.
Exactly.
Okay. We're going to get into what exactly the details of these stories are and why they're significant, but I want to say something else before that, which the Gemara says this book. So Yotza Basko, a heavenly voice came out of Amr Loya and said to Menashe, Teishe B'achicha, it's a verse in Tehillim, which is Teishe B'achicha Sedaber, you're speaking badly about your brother, Beven Imech Titin Doifi, from the son of your mother, you are saying flawedness, you're casting flawed. Ela Sisi V'Charashti, these I made and I have like honed. I will be with you and I will indicate to you and show you to your eyes the value that these things have. In other words, this is my Torah, this is my word. Don't start casting aspersions on them. The Gemara concludes, before it gets into the interpretation of what these verses actually mean. Of Menashe, it says explicitly in the words of our tradition, referring to the words of the prophet. Woe is to the one who pulls sin with a rope, with a cord, and like the ropes of a wagon, he pulls sin. So said the Gemara, what does this mean when it says like the ropes of a wagon? Rasi says, Yetzer Hara, the wicked one, the evil inclination. First it tells you it acts like a string, shalkuvia, like a small woven, like a spun string. Then it becomes later like ropes of a wagon. That's to say, it doesn't start off telling you the worst things. First it tells you, oh, it's this, not so bad, do a little thing here, a little thing there, like a little string, and then by the time you're done, it's pulling you like a wagon.
Yeah. Kuvia is like a spider web, like the little strands of a spider web, it's all thin, and then it becomes strong like the...
It strings you along.
It strings,
exactly.
So before I get to even
the
this...
addictive or nature of the build-up.
This itself is worthy of bringing this understanding that the Yetzer Hara is like a slippery slope that starts off telling you the smallest thing. It's not such a big deal. It's not a big deal. We've talked about that in the past. But there's something I do want to indicate before, which the Gemara says like this, where God tells Menashe not to think of the words of Torah as frivolous. The Rebbe took this idea, I don't know that he quoted this Gemara directly, but took the idea and broadened it and took it to its absolute and logical conclusion. Namely, the word Torah itself comes from the word Hayra, which means instruction. So the Rebbe would insist that every single part of Torah is an instruction. Besides the fact that the Kabbalah itself, a lot of these parts of the Torah, which say, for example, this king lived for this amount of years and he died, and this king, whole list of peoples and names and places and dates which seem to be arbitrary, the Kabbalah itself goes through each one on what they signify in the spiritual worlds. Besides for that, the Rebbe insisted that every single line in Torah is not just has some Kabbalistic meaning, and not just has a meaning in history, but actually has a lesson for you. Torah Melashon Hayron, it's built on this idea that if God put it in His Torah and He wants Jews to study it for the next 3,500 years, it's because there's a message, an eternal and a timeless message invested in these words forever. And the same thing is true of our learning Gemara, which is what we endeavor to do here. Even times when the Gemara says things that to our mind seems like, what's the Gemara doing here? First of all, we accept that this is God's Torah, and this is God's Torah, finished. And because we don't understand what the point is, the lack is not in the Torah, but lack is in us. And our job is to try to find, following the way that Rebbe would take this idea, to try to find the lesson and message that we can learn from all the things that we read. But God forbid to assume that because we don't understand it, therefore it's frivolous. God forbid. So the Gemara next week is going to get into exactly what these, why we care about the sister of Leighton, who they were, why is it important that Reuven went out to get these flowers, etc. Yeah, what can you say? Good Shabbos.
No, I think to decipher it, sure.
That's the challenge. That's the Amal Torah. That's the effort we put in Torah to try to figure out what the message to us and each one of these things are. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody, and a good Shabbos.